Hello, everyone. Happy New Year. Darlene from Digital Photo Mentor here. Uh, I'm going to stay small in the camera today because I'm dealing with some allergies this week. So I'm a little bit sniffly and droopy. So I'm going to keep my face a little bit on the small side of the camera today. Today, we're going to be editing some holiday photos that have been submitted by subscribers here on the YouTube channel. And these are the images I'm going to be working with today. So we'll take a look at those. We have some from Sheila, lots from Sheila, Sheila, and a couple from Trish. So it'll be interesting to see, how is holidays different? How's Christmas different down under for Trish? Maybe it's not. And I've also got a few images that I took. We talked about Bokeh just before New Year's, before Christmas, and I've got some images with Bokeh, and I thought I would just show you those and a little bit of my process in how I actually evolved the shot. So that's something that I talk about as well. So I see we have lots of regulars: Sheila, David, Deb, Marguerite, Daniela, Feliz Año Nuevo. Well, yes, Feliz Navidad as well. So I'm going to get started with these holiday photos. And what I've done is I've kind of put colors on them. You see, one of the things that you can do in Lightroom, and I talk about this in our Lightroom course, in the library module, is you can use color labels on your images. And you can see that I've used yellow on some of them, like this, and blue on some others, right? And the color labels you can add just by selecting down here. Will this be sorting by yellow, so I can show just the yellow ones. And it's one of the tools that's available in Lightroom to help you sort of categorize or just label your images to find them later, or if you're looking through a particular folder. In this example, I've labeled the ones that Sheila submitted in yellow because she said she wanted to work in Lightroom, and Trish is working in Neo. So I'm using yellow for Lightroom and blue for Neo. And consequently, I also have a spreadsheet of the questions that you submitted with your images, and I label each person's line based on the software they want to use. So that's how I'm using color labels in this case. Right? Now we've got some more regulars: Zay, Nigel, Nancy, Ruth. Welcome. All right, so I'm going to get started with these, and I'm just going to kind of pick a few that are similar. So Sheila submitted these 3 images taken indoors, right? So let's take a look at them. So it looks like we've got a dinner setting, some decorations, and another decoration. So I'm going to work with the dinner setting because I like the idea of the candlelight. So let's take this one into the develop module. Right? Because candlelight is something that you may have the opportunity to work in that type of low light. Rob, if you could please share the article on low light photography. And somebody is coming to the door, Rob, so you might have to come and answer the door. Looks like they just dropped something off. So something's been dropped off at the front door. I'm collecting donations for a group in the city that works with homeless people. So it's possible that I've just had something dropped off, like warm hats and mittens and so on. So if you could please share the article on photographing in low light, because I want to take a look at Sheila's settings here as well. I had them on. There we go. Right. So in terms of the settings, there's her exposure information. We can see that it was ISO 320, f10 at 1.3 seconds. So obviously she is using a tripod. Okay, so that tells me that she is using a tripod. What tells me that? The 1.3 second exposure. How to photograph in low light, or low light photography tips, please, Rob, is the one I'm looking for. So she has used a tripod because you cannot hold your camera steady for 1.3 seconds. It's literally physically impossible without some sort of device to steady the camera. Okay, she's used f10 because I'm guessing she wants to have the table in focus and have more depth of field. So those are great settings, right? So she's done, let's see if she's done the same here. Okay, similar here and similar here. Right? So The low ISO, when you're photographing with a tripod, allows you to do a longer exposure, and you'll eliminate some of the noise that you'll get from high ISO, right? So noise comes from three different things. It comes from high ISO, long exposures, and it also comes in what's called the blue channel, which is at night. You have lots of blue. It also comes when you underexpose an image and push up the exposure. Okay, so let's take a look at processing this one. Okay, so as usual, the first thing I want to look at is the color profile or the camera profile. So let's take a look at camera matching, right? And her camera is a Nikon, so these would be Nikon profiles. Okay, I could tell because it's an NEF file, right? So as we hover the mouse over, you can see how it changes. Okay, so landscape is a lot contrastier. Portrait, actually, portrait looks pretty nice. Neutral looks good as well. Standard and vivid. As mentioned previously, I almost never use vivid because it's adding too much contrast, and then I end up trying to undo that. So I like what portrait's doing. See, when I hover over, and you see what that's doing up in here, it's making the dark areas not quite as dark, so it's lowering the contrast a little bit. So I'm actually going to go with portrait, right? Then, as usual, I'm going to look at the whites and the blacks. And if I hold my Alt key down, when I click on the white slider, actually any of these will give you that effect. So I'm holding the Alt Option key and clicking the slider. Okay, it's showing me that the candles themselves are indeed clipping, which I'm not worried about. Okay, I can bring the highlights down, right, if we want to not clip them. And that will give us a little bit more color in the candles. But look at, I didn't have to do much, right? I'm going to minus, look at that, minus 6, 7, minus 9 on the highlights, and that has brought in the color of the candles, okay? So if we go a little bit more, see how the candles start to look gray. So I'm just going to go a little bit. Let's try minus 13, okay? That looks pretty good. Then I'm going to check the blacks because I want to have some black. So I'm going to do the shift double click on the word blacks and then just double check it with the Alt Option key. Okay, so see, as I let go of the key, that happens. So I'm getting a little bit of black clipping. I'm going to actually clip a little bit more on purpose. Right, now remember, if I increase the exposure, what is it affecting? It's affecting the midtones. So it's going to brighten up all of this midsection of the table. So let's do that. See how it brought out some detail in here and in the background, okay? So not shadows, that was exposure, okay? If I go with shadows, let's see the difference. See, now I'm opening up the background, okay? But we just need a tiny bit of exposure, like 0.35, okay? So I'm not going to extremes here, and we've lowered the contrast a little bit, okay? I'm going to use Alt again just to double check the candles. We can bring them down a little bit more. You know, color. We can adjust the color of this image if we want to have it less yellow. However, what do you know about candles, right? Candles are glowing with this orange and yellow color. So if we color correct it, so for example, I could choose tungsten. Okay, so even though these are not tungsten lights, they're candles, anything that has a lot of orange in it, like tungsten or a light bulb, right, like a natural light bulb, it's going to filter out the orange. So it's going to add blue. Okay, so watch what happens when I choose tungsten. Not so much in this case. Okay, let's try auto. Let's see what it does with auto. So auto is going to try and neutralize any color tint. Again, a little bit less yellow, but I'm going to try the targeted tool and select this sort of white doily thing on the tablecloth here. And look at the thumbnail in the upper, where's my finger? Upper left corner of Lightroom. As I move this over the tablecloth, see how neutral the image is now? Even this coffee cup or this teacup here. Okay, so if we know that this cup is white, if I click on the cup, look what happens. Okay, so now the cup is white, but the whole image doesn't feel as warm. Okay, so yes, this is color corrected, right, for perfect color of the subject, but does it feel right? To me, it doesn't. Okay, because we know that candles are actually warm. So I'm going to go with as shot, and I might dial the yellow down just a little bit, like so. So I still want it to be warm, but just not quite as warm. Okay, so we want that warm glow of the candles. So in some cases, you don't want to color correct and get rid of the tint entirely, and this is one of those cases because you get the mood of the candles. Okay. Collection of food collection. Um, so Sheila is referring to the person that possibly came to the door with some donations, and what we're collecting is um, not so much food, but mostly warm things because it's very cold in our city, like up to minus 30 Celsius in the winter. People who are homeless on the street literally have trouble surviving. So collecting warm blankets, toques is a very Canadian thing. You might call it a beanie if you're in the States. Gloves, mitts, that kinds of things. Sleeping bags as well. So to help people survive, as well as some food items, but more of clothing and blankets, that kind of thing. But my neighborhood has been really great because we put out a call, or I put out a call on a couple of Facebook groups, and I've actually collected about 8 bags of things. So wonderful. Daniela has a question. Okay, very interesting. Candles and fireworks are always hard because I thought they, by the way, I thought there were no homeless people in Canada. No, not the case at all. It's actually a really big problem, Daniela. There's lots of homeless people, and COVID made it even harder. We have probably about 3,000 homeless people in our city. I think Edmonton is about 1 million people, and we have about that we figure 3,000 plus homeless people. So yeah, it's a real problem, as Rob says, and growing because people lost jobs during COVID, lost their businesses. So lots of newly homeless people. But good news, yesterday we actually took a package to a man who is recently housed. So he just got a house, and we helped him get some things to set up his house. Okay, so honestly, I wouldn't do much more to this image. I might consider adding a preset just to darken the edges. So all I'm doing is adding a vignette that's out of my Lightroom presets that I created. So that's just under the effects panel. Okay, so we're just darkening the edges a tiny little bit. But other than that, I probably wouldn't do a lot here. And the interesting thing is, I think it's a little bit green. I feel like it's green. So I'm going to give it a little bit of magenta. I could copy and paste this setting onto the next image as well. Okay, so it's not taken with candlelight, but house light, which is also very warm. So if you have LED lights in your home, they may be more color corrected than, say, the old style incandescent light bulbs. Okay, so let's take a look at the next image. See, this one's very yellow as well. But let's just see what happens if I hit previous. So when you click this previous button here in Lightroom, it copies the settings from the last image that you worked on, the very last one, into this new image. Okay. So you can see that indeed, okay, it's changed the camera profile, and you can see the before and after. Okay. It definitely has taken away that orange. Now, in this case, if we want to color correct and we know that this wall is white, well, let's say I know that his beard should be white. Okay. I'm going to zoom in a little bit actually. And let me put this target on him. So I know that he should have white cheeks. So I'm going to choose there. Okay. So that's now color corrected for him. And it looks a little bit magenta to me. I see that the wall looks a little pink. That's a little bit greener. So what's happening is this light here is reflecting in through the tree and adding some green light into him. So the green is reflecting off of him. So when I do the color correction, it's made the rest of the whole image magenta. Okay, so the opposites. But look at how far down it took the temperature slider. I'm going to warm it up just a tiny bit. Okay. So again, you don't necessarily want pure neutral. Okay, you don't necessarily want pure neutral. And when you're dealing with an image of people, especially if you go with pure neutral, the skin tones tend to look pale, right, or pasty. And if you give them a little bit more yellow, then the skin tones are a little better. Okay, so I'm still finding some green in here. So let's just find this dance here. So I'm doing this dance of color correcting. Okay, so color correcting doesn't necessarily mean neutral. Color correcting is also a visual and an artistic choice. Okay. This one I'm going to crop a tiny little bit because there's a little bit of looks like a shelf or something down here. So I'm going to come in just a tiny bit to actually get rid of that. And I wish that there was a bit more space above his head, right? But it looks like the violin is the subject here, so I want to make sure to keep all of it because it's bigger in the frame, right? Maybe if you could share the article on visual mass, please, Rob, because this here is a perfect example of the violin has visual mass. Okay, so Sheila, tell me, what was your subject here? Was it the nutcracker or was it the violin? Because the violin is so large, it takes up so much space and visual mass in the image that it becomes the subject. Okay. And let's see what Sheila has says. I would have used shadows and opened up the background more. Is that a difference in how we see things? I'm going to go back to the candle image to have a look at that. So the thing with opening up the shadows more is, do you need to see what's in the background, right? Is that important? Okay, so if we open up the shadows more, right, we see a bit more of the chair and whatnot there. So if that's important to you, then by all means open up the shadows. But when you do that, make sure to go back and check blacks because it tends to eliminate the blacks and then you have a flat image. Okay, so I'm going to add the blacks back. And then it's this dance of, okay, opening up the shadows a little bit more and making sure that we still have black. Okay, so the before and after. And to be honest, I actually don't mind the really, really dark moodiness of having the shadows be dark because for me, if I remove that setting here, for me, it's more about the candles and the mood than it is the background, right? I don't care that there's wood paneling on the wall or what's on the chair. For me, this picture is all about the mood and the feeling of sitting down to dinner at this table. What does that feel like? Okay, so I would leave it the shadows darker. Yes. And now she has said that the subject here is the violin. Okay, so then that's perfect. So if you wanted the nutcracker to be the subject, honestly, you'd have to remove the violin because it's too big in the frame. So you'd have to take it out of the frame before you took the picture. Okay, this one here, I'm actually going to play. I got an idea as I was looking at this here, and when you said the violin is the subject, because I'm going to play around with some of these other profiles, and I'm thinking that let's take a look at either vintage or artistic, because I feel like I want it to have sort of like an antique sepia look. And ooh, that's kind of cool. So this one here, vintage number 6. See, it's giving it sort of a matte look, meaning the blacks get sort of blocked up a little bit, but I kind of like that. I kind of like that. And we can dial it down a little bit. So I'm going to choose that one and keep going over them. And I'm just hovering over. Okay, so far I like that one. Let's take a look at artistic and see if there's anything in here. And I'm just going by gut instinct. Okay, so that one's kind of cool too. But I like the effect of what that one is doing that we've selected. Okay, once you've got one selected, okay, this vintage number 6, you can dial it down or up. Okay, so see, as I dial it, increase it up, we get more of the shadows. They're literally blocking up. And you can see that the shadows themselves and the blacks are off the edge of the graph, meaning it's not pure black. Okay, so no matter what we do here, we're not going to get pure black. Okay, I'm going to leave it somewhere fairly high. I like this effect. Maybe about 90%. So I'm going to go with 90. Okay. And it just changes the look of it. Then the next thing I'm going to do, okay, so this is about styling more than it is correcting, okay, is I'm going to go into color grading because I still have this idea of this sepia tone. So I'm going to go into the shadow areas, okay, and choose an orangey color over here on the color wheel. And then just increase the saturation. So what it's doing, see, is adding orange into the shadows, which gives us more of that sepia kind of look. Maybe just a slightly bit more yellow. Right? If you can't tell what color to use, dial the saturation all the way up, right? And then you'll see what color it is. You can move it around, right? I'm looking at the violin here because adding this orange is actually bringing out the wood pattern. the wood grain. See that? So I like that. And the highlights are a little bit green for me. So I'm going to go and do highlights. And then I'm just going to play with adjusting them. I'm going to add some blue into the highlights. So see what that's doing? It's actually correcting some of the color on the wall. Okay. If I turn this off, okay, so I'm going to toggle the color grading off. It's kind of subtle. Can you see what it's doing? Let me take it a little farther. Let me drag this up a little higher. And I'll take this one a little higher. Okay, so toggle it off again. So off. Watch the violin and the tree here. On. See the color shift? Just warms it up a little bit. Okay, so if you have an image like this one that has some odd color shifts and you're not being able to correct it with the white balance sliders or the eyedropper, try some color grading on the highlights and the shadows, because you can actually change them differently, right? So we made the shadows yellow or warmer and the highlights bluer. Okay, so what do you guys think about that? I'm having Bailey's in my coffee this morning. Okay, so now that I've done that, let's go to the next image and do previous again. So it's going to take all of those same things. Okay, so I've clicked it. See how it did the same look? So when you do things like changing the camera profile and doing that color grading, it's given it a really specific look. And then when we go and look at these two together, and I did see your question, Danielle, I'll answer that in a minute, they have a cohesiveness. Okay, can you see that? So when we have a collection of images that are similar and you want to have a tie between them or a particular style, right? Those kinds of things really help to add a cohesive style. Okay, let me go back to Daniela's question. Okay, this is about the nutcracker, right? How would you remove the shadow on the wall at the right of the image? It's distracting for my eyes. Travel through the violin to the end of it. Okay, that's a good question. So let's take a look at that. So I did a video on the new spot removal tools in Lightroom. And in the spot removal tool now, you have 3 options, not just 2. And the first one is content aware fill. Okay, so if you, or content aware remove, if you hover your mouse over, you can see it says there content aware remove. This one is healing, and this one is cloning. Okay, so the content aware remove is actually really, really good. Okay, so if we take a large brush and paint over the whole shadow, let's see what happens. Okay, it's going to choose the information from around it based on the surrounding area and try and fill it in. Okay, so right out of the gate, it looks pretty good. If you're not happy with it, you can do a refresh and it will just sort of resample the area. So you can just keep clicking refresh until you get something that you're happy with. Okay, that looks pretty good. Or you can use your command key on your keyboard. So if you press command, and you can draw a box from which it's going to source. So it's going to pull from this area with the box into this other area here. Okay, let's see if it does anything. Aha, okay, see how that fixed that? Now, the only thing that I would want to correct is this little area up here. But you see, I can't paint there because if I put my mouse there, it just shows me the hand, right? We've got some spammers there, Rob. So to trick it, what you need to do is I'm just going to get a smaller brush, okay, and I'm going to paint the size that I want over here. I'm just going to paint it here. So I'm just going to draw a little line, okay, and then I'm going to take this one and drag it over top. See that? So it's a trick. And there it goes. Right? If you have my Lightroom class, check your emails because I have sent email with a new lesson in the Lightroom course that I've added on using this tool as well as the new masking tools for select object, background, and people. Okay, so I added a bunch of things for that. All right. All right, so does that answer your question, Daniela? So that's what I would use to remove that. And see how easy that was, right? So if we look at, I'll just close that tool. If we look at the before and after, you're right. It was pretty distracting. And now it just kind of looks like the wall is modeled a little bit, which actually is kind of antique looking, right? So I don't mind that at all. This one actually is a really good one that might be a texture added. So let's try that. Let's take this one to Luminar, and I'm going to go directly to Luminar. So I'm not going to go to Photoshop as a smart object because all I want to do is add a texture here, right? So I'm going to go directly to Neo, and I know there is an update 1.6.2 or something like that for Neo, and I haven't installed it yet because I wanted to make sure I got today's live done before I did that, okay? See, there we go. See, so basically it's just some improvements to the extensions and bug fixes. So I won't be making a video about this one because it's hard to show speed improvements, right? So I will install that later. But what I want to do is just add a texture overlay. So I could have done this in Photoshop as well, but I actually just find it easier in Luminar, partly because any of the textures that I've already added here as a layer, so I just click add a layer, right? Plus right here. Any that I've previously added are here for my easy reference. In Photoshop, I have to go find them and then add them and all that stuff, okay? So let me just have a look here at what I think might be a good texture. I want this wall to have some texture, and this one might look, this is from my new Morocco set. Okay, so if I increase the opacity here, see that's kind of working well with that background image, right? We can also flip it around, okay, if I want to have it be the orange part at the top, but we need to change the blend mode, okay? Because normal means that this layer fully opacity at 100, you can't see the bottom one, you can't see the nutcracker anymore. So when you're doing a texture, I find that the ones that work the best are overlay or soft light. So let's try one of those, right? There's overlay, and let's try soft light. Okay, that looks pretty good too. Okay, so now I can choose how I want to orient this. I don't want this part showing here, so I definitely want to flip it that way. Let's see. I like this part here. I'm trying to fill this in, okay? Now we could literally mask this so that it's not on the violin and on the nutcracker, right? So I can go in and mask, and I'm just going to use a brush and erase. I'm not going to fully erase it though. Let's go about 50%. So I'm just going to erase a bit. Okay, I want to make sure I don't overlap because I don't want to have a halo around him. Okay, and then I'm going to do it from the violin again, 50%. But it makes the violin look sort of aged, right? Which is kind of cool. So that's really, really neat, actually. A smaller brush. I actually like the texture over here. So I'm going to go back in and paint it back in. See that? And there's like a little crack there. So that's pretty cool. So it makes the violin look older. Right? Now, once we've got it masked, we can decide how much opacity we want to apply. I think somewhere around 60. Okay. So that's pretty cool. So just doing that. Now, if I want to further that sort of antique look, I know that I can do that with the mood tool here in Luminar. And one thing they've changed here is they've now categorized them. Okay, so where you used to see a big list of lots, okay, now they're sort of categorized. So the ones that we're used to seeing are still there. The default ones, they're just in categories, right? And any custom ones that you've added are shown there as a list, okay? So I know the one that I want to use, and it's in creative, and it's sepia. Sepia, smoky, and wooden are probably my favorites, right? So sepia literally turns the image into a sepia tone, right? But keep in mind, where am I applying this? This is only applying to the texture, right? So if I want it to apply to the overall image, guess what I have to do? I have to go to the other layer, right? So I'm going to go to the layer. I'm going to go to mood and get that same sepia, because now when I apply it, the whole image is sepia. Okay, can you see that? Actually, I'm going to change my mind, and I think I'm going to go with smoky because it leaves a little bit more color. So that's kind of cool. Let's try wooden. So that's adding more of that sort of matte faded out look that we had from the preset in Lightroom. The camera profiles are similar to LUTs. And if you're using a Fuji camera, for example, your Fuji profiles will not show up in Luminar. And I've done some research on that, and that is because that the Fuji profiles are actually cube files, which is more of a LUT. Okay, so if you want to apply your Fuji profiles, you can import them as LUTs. It's a little bit complicated, right? Let's see. There's a custom one that I think might work well. Some of these here are from the Ukraine collection. Oh, I like that one. And this one, yeah, this one looks good. Let's give it a bit more saturation. There we go. So there's the before from Lightroom. Right? And then if we decide we want less texture, we can dial it down a little bit. Something like that. I'm quite happy with that. So the texture looks pretty believable, right? The other thing that's sort of bothering me is this light here, and I'm not sure if I want to remove it entirely. We could try the erase tool. If I remove it entirely, it might look weird because there's light coming from here, but no light source. So let's just see what happens if I erase it. We do the same thing in Lightroom as well. I'm going to do one other. Actually, it looks okay. So it looks like the light's coming from this side. This bothers me over here as well because it's this bright area that's drawing my attention. Okay, so all of the things that are bright will draw your attention. And then let's do this one. So the erase tool, let me get that one too, in Luminar is really great. So it basically is the same as the new content spot removal. I gotta think about the name of it. It's the same as the new content aware spot removal tool in Lightroom. That's what the erase tool in Luminar does. Okay, so they do the same thing. So I like that. Right? Now the other thing that I can do is super contrast to lower some of these highlights here. Okay, so I can increase the highlight contrast. See how it's pulling down that light on the wall. But I just want it to affect this area here. So I'm going to brush it in here, okay? So I don't want it to affect the wall. See what that's doing. So it's darkening that area here, okay? Now I'm going to take it back to Lightroom by clicking Apply. Sheila says, I love what you did on the violin. I need to start jumping in and editing. I get lost and I can't get back. Yesterday, I started Neo's lessons all over again. That's fine. It's a new year. Start over. Reviewing is never a bad thing. Lisa, she likes the texture, and Daniela likes the texture as well. Yeah, honestly, it just kind of popped into my head when you asked me to remove that spot on the background, Daniela, because, or how I would remove it, because that gave me an idea. After I removed it, it looked kind of textured, and I thought, I'm gonna kind of go with it. Okay. Yes, the highlight, I know you're talking about the highlight. It looks kind of grayish. So this highlight here did go kind of gray, and I'm not super happy with that. But actually, again, I could go in here and just color it. So what I could do is use one of the masks, and I could do a luminance range and just select this area here. Okay. Now it's picking up all of this area up in the top here, but it's doing what I want down here. I'm just going to change my overlay color. So I can't really see the overlay very well. I can't see what it's selecting. So this might be a time when I want to choose the part in black and white. Okay, so now it's showing me in color what I have selected. Okay, so I'm just going to expand that. And then I'll do a subtract on the wall. I don't want to get the wall, but what I'm going to do is just going to give it a color, right? So I'm going to choose this. I'm going to give it some yellow. And then I'm just going to add some yellow. Okay, so the highlight did go kind of gray, but I'm now giving it orange. Okay, so see what it's doing? It's just affecting that highlight. Let me zoom in here a little bit. Okay, so watch the highlight. See, it's just affecting this area. Okay, so what I did there was luminance range, so the brightness range, right? Narrowed it down using these tools here, and then subtracted using a linear gradient on the top. Okay, you can see what it's selecting there if you do this way, show luminance map. So it's selecting the highlight, and then I just added some yellow into it. Okay, so kind of a fix for that. Now I'm noticing that I've lost all the white. So I'm going to go back in here with my little Alt key and add some white back. Okay, so I could do Shift double click as well and do that here. Okay, kind of like the matte look though. Okay, now we've got more contrast, but I like that matte look that I had before. So we can do that easily by just bringing up the blacks in this curves. If you want to start the video on curves, please, Rob, this is a little trick, right? If you bring up the black on the curves, basically, see what it's doing here is it's pushing the histogram in. Okay, so it's saying I want black to be dark gray instead of black. Okay, so that's what this is doing. Okay, so if I want that matte look again, I just have to bring this up a little bit. Okay, now if I want white to be darker, I can do the same or brighter. I can actually bring this in to touch the histogram down here. Okay. His cheek is clipping a tiny little bit, so I'll just back it off a little bit. There we go. So now we just brightened it up a little, and we've got a nice texture. Hey, Daniel. So we got Daniela, who is in Uruguay, Dan, and Dan, who is in Miami, but he is from Argentina. So welcome, Dan. Nice to see you. Okay. So anyone that missed the beginning of this one, let's go back here and compare to the original. So I'm going to do a virtual copy of Sheila's original image. And then I'm just going to do a reset. So we have the original unedited image. And then let's look at all three in progression. Okay. So here are the three. Oops. Wrong key. N. There we go. Okay, so there's the three. So this is what we started with. Okay, the original image. For heaven's sake, my keyboard's going crazy. All right, let's try that again. Original image. Right. So it was very orange. This is what came out of Lightroom. So I cropped it a little bit, dealt with this shadow on the wall or this reflection on the wall, did some color correction. Then we really gave it a style using Luminar Neo. That's actually a video that I'm going to be making very soon in terms of what I do in Luminar to add style to my images. And you saw two things right there: texture overlays, texture or bokeh overlay, and a mood or a LUT. So I use those a lot. And it looks like it was just like Marguerite says she likes the new texture on the wall. Doesn't it look like that wall actually looks like that, right? It looks really believable, right? So I chose a good texture. All right, let's take a look at one of Trisha's. We got Santa in the car in a couple of versions here. So it looks like she took it from one side and then from the other side. Okay, so we got Santa and some snowmen, okay? Now, which side of the truck is he on? Is he on the right side, Trish? Because they drive on the other side of the road down under. And I've actually rented cars down there and managed to not get in trouble for the most part. So let's take a look at this one, okay? Because I like the fact that we can see Santa and the both snowmen, and then let's do both. Okay, so let's start with Santa and the snowman here. And the first thing I want to do before I even do camera profiles here is actually crop it, because I don't want to see any of this stuff over here in and here. So the easiest way to get rid of some of these distractions is literally just to crop it in. So I'm going to keep the aspect ratio so I can lock it here. Or the other way to do that is just to hold the shift key down. Okay, so I'm going to hold shift, and then when I drag this in, it keeps the aspect ratio or the shape. Okay, if you don't hold shift, you can make whatever shape you want. Okay, so I'm just going to come in a little bit on that side, and then a little bit on that side, and then just center it over the window like so. So we're getting rid of all of this sort of busyness around Santa and the snowman. Right? But we still keep the nice frame of the window. Maybe a little bit less of the mirror. There we go. Okay. Now, Santa's really dark, right? So there's a couple of things we can do. We can try select subject, but let's go back to the basics here. Let's do the camera profile first. So I'm going to go with Astia. Okay, so she's doing a Fuji because there's a Fuji profiles. Okay, so I'm going to go with Provia, and I'm going to do shift double click. Now notice how it's taken the whites down because it's seeing the bright areas in the background. So I want to adjust for them, not for this stuff in the background. Okay, so I'm going to hold the Alt Option key. And if the stuff on the outside is clipping, I'm not too worried about it, or the stuff in the background, because I'm really adjusting for Santa and the snowman. We'll come back to these things in a minute. Okay, then I'm going to brighten it. Okay, so the midtones, remember midtones. So look at our histogram. Okay, so this one was a little bit underexposed. Okay, so when you're photographing one like this, it's really tricky because you've got a bright background, a bright foreground, this white truck, and then the inside is dark. So your camera's going to get tricked. Okay, so it was a pretty good exposure, but a little dark. Okay. So what I'm going to do next is we can try select subject with the masking and see if it picks Santa and the snowman. Oops. Where's my tools? Oops. I'm somehow, there we go. There we go. Okay. I've lost my tools. Select subject. There we go. Okay, so it did indeed. Let me just change the overlay back to color. Okay, so it's selecting the entire inside. You know, I don't want the entire inside because it's going to brighten the stuff in the background that I don't want. Okay, so instead of doing select object or select subject like this, what I'm going to do is select object. Okay, so this is one of the new masking things that I just covered. Right, so now it allows me to do either a square or paint around the object that I want to select. So I'm going to get a big brush and I'm going to select. I'm just going to roughly paint. Okay, now you don't have to be perfect at this painting at all. All you need to do is get most of it. Okay, so I've got Santa and the snowman, and see how it did a really good job of finding the edges of them, and it's not getting the background stuff. Okay, now, if I want the inside of the truck to be lightened as well, I could go a second time and say add object and then paint around the truck, but I don't. Okay, so I want to just brighten them. Okay, so now I want to add some whites, and I can't use that Alt key trick anymore. It doesn't work when you're in a mask. So I'm going to press J on my keyboard, which will then show me the clipping warnings with this little red. Okay. Okay, so see how it's brightening them. And I'm going to warm them up. So now the snowman is clipping a little bit. So I'm going to dial that back. So I'm doing this dance between increasing the whites, increasing the exposure. It looks like it is picking up the background a little bit, which is odd. It shouldn't be. That looks pretty good. And then I'm going to warm Santa up a little bit as well. So this is actually another change that happened with the last update, which is 12.1. one, I think, is now on your masking. You'll see that they have them sectioned, okay? So you can go into solo mode here because now you've got tone, color, presence, and detail. Whereas before it was just one big long column of adjustments for the masking tools. Now you can do them by section, okay? So I just gave them a little bit of warmth in the color, and that looks pretty good. Okay, so I'm just gonna rename Santa and Snowman. So that's that mask. See what that's doing. That does a really good job of selecting them. Now I want to select the outer part of this truck here. Okay, so what is the best way to do that? I could do select object again and paint around the truck, but I'm going to try another method. I'm going to try luminance range, and I'm just going to draw over this white. Okay, so it's done a pretty good job of selecting most of the truck, but I don't want it to select any of these guys. Okay, so I could also do minus object here. So subtract object and then just paint them again. Okay, so now I'm selecting all the bright white areas except them. So it's getting the background. Okay, so watch what happens if I darken. I go into tone here. See, it's picking up the background. Now it's not getting that spot there. So I could add that spot. Okay, I'm going to do an add. So all I'm doing is adding to the mask. Okay, and this time I'm going to choose object. I might zoom in a little bit so I can paint a little better here. And I'm using the square bracket keys to select object. So I'm just going to paint around this bright area in here. Okay, so I don't want Santa, and I'm adding this now. Okay, so I subtracted Santa. There we go. So now I'm adding that area. So we can see what's being selected. Okay, so I'm getting all this part of the truck, bit of the background, and this area in here. And what I'm doing is darkening the highlights so that white is being toned down and darkening the exposure. Okay, like so. And while I'm in here, we could also lower the texture and the clarity, which will eliminate some of that sort of sharpness. Okay, so especially this area here where there's this sign, I could come back in here and use the cloning tool because the sign, things with words on them also draw attention. Okay, so let's do another one. We could do a mask and get rid of that here, or I could just use the cloning tool and try and mask it or erase it. So let's just see what happens if I draw over the words here. Let's see if it can erase them. So I'm using that content aware fill again. I didn't draw large enough. So let me just, okay, so I'm going to erase it and do it again because I didn't draw a big enough spot. So I was missing part of the G. Okay. It kind of made a gray line. I'll just do a refresh. I just want it to look believable. Okay. And if it's not, I just filled it in with a texture, which kind of looks okay. If it's not getting me what I want, remember, I can do Command, and I'm just going to select from down here. I want it to have a smooth area to pick from. It's adding the color, so not happy with that. Thought it would be more neutral. That looks okay. And I'm going to do the same with this word here. Okay, so I'm just trying to get rid of these words, right? Because words will grab your attention as well as bright areas. Right? And if this one is not working, you could try one of the other tools. Okay? If we go to the healing tool, okay, it's choosing a spot from over here, which actually worked really well. So maybe I'll change this one as well. So change this one to healing. And let's see what it picks. It picked that, but let's pick something from the snowman. I liked what it chose there. We could put Santa's beard over there. Let's see. I'm just trying to find a white or neutral-ish area. Okay, that looks pretty good. That's not bad. I just want it to be somewhat believable, and the words are gone. Okay, so there's our before. Okay, so very dark, and after. I'm also going to add an edge vignette here. So again, I'm darkening the edge, maybe just low, maybe medium. So when we look at the image, where's my, oops. When we look at the image full screen, right, now Santa and the snowman really stand out. So before, before. So now we could do the same kind of thing with this one, okay? Now, if I had done select subject, we could copy and paste to this one, but because I did select object and they're in different places, it's not going to work the same. Okay, so I'll have to redo this one. Okay, so let's see what happens. I'm going to copy some of these things though. Okay, so I'm going to do a Command C, and I'm going to copy everything except the cropping, the healing, and the masking. And so I'm copying the white balance, the profile, everything else except those custom things, and then I'm pasting. So immediately we have some better color, and we've got a nicer starting point. Okay, now I just need to select this stuff in the window because it's really, really bright. Okay, so let's try subject and see if it picks Santa and the snowman. Okay, it did. So here we can brighten them. And generally, when I'm brightening, I like to add some white and some black, right? Because otherwise they lose their color, right? If we brighten too much. Right? So let's see what that's doing. So it's brightening them, but keeping the contrast. So then we'll just call this Santa. It's probably Frosty. Now I want to select this window, okay? So we could do a radial filter, radial gradient, and see if that works. But again, I think select object is going to be the best choice. This time I'm going to demonstrate what happens if you use a square. So see these little icons right here? So mode, you can choose the brush, okay? If you hover over, it shows you. Brush select, paint over an object to create a refined mask, okay? Powered by AI. Okay, says recommended for objects with a complex background. Paint over the entire object plus a little extra, it says. Okay, so it tells you that. The square one here is rectangle select. Draw a rectangle around an object to create a mask. Recommended for objects that are clearly distinguishable from the background. So this one might work well. So I'm going to draw around the window like this. See, we're getting part of the truck and part of Santa, but let's see what happens. Right, so it did pretty good, but it selected some of the truck, which I'm not happy about, and it missed this section here, right? So we could do a minus or a subtract, or I could do undo and try object again. Let me try a better selection. I'm gonna just not go as high with my selection. Let's see if I do that. There we go. Okay, so now it's a better selection up here, and it still missed this part here. Okay, so I can add to it, and there's a couple of ways you could add to it. We could do another select object. Okay, I want this section right here. So I could do add object, or we could just use the brush and turn on auto mask. Okay, so auto mask helps you paint, and it will find the edges. So as I paint, it's looking for the edge contrast there, and it's not going over into the steering wheel. Right? See that? So that was pretty simple. Okay, so once again, now I have the selection. Now I can do the edits. So I want to take the highlights down, the exposure down, right? And I also want to, let's even shift the color, but we want to take the texture and the clarity down because we want to blur it, as well as under detail, the sharpness. So if you use the sharpness slider all the way to minus 100, you'll get sort of more of what looks like an actual lens blur. Okay. If we go back here, I'm going to lower the contrast even more. So if you lower the contrast, you start to get sort of mushy colors, which is fine. So we're still getting that bright spot in the window, but we can use the erase tool to fix that. Okay, so see what that's doing. Darkening that way down. Okay, window. And the reason for renaming your mask is if you want to do a copy and paste to another image, right? So if I do copy, it tells you what they are. So when we're going to another image that's similar, that has Santa and the snowman and the window in the same place, I could choose to select these masks, okay? So the last thing I'm going to do is this healing tool. Again, I'm going to use the content aware one. And let's just see if we can get rid of this big white blob spot right in the middle here. Okay. Let's see what it does. Not sure what it's pulling there, but let's just try refresh a couple times. Remember, I can do the little trick. So if it gets rid of most of it, I can do another little spot. Okay. So it seems to just be cycling over again with these ones. That's not bad. Okay. So now I'm just going to take a spot over here, draw another. Let me get this bigger. I'm going to see how I want to get this spot. So my brush is about the same size. I'm just going to draw a line, right? And then I'm going to move it over this area. Okay, now it's not wide enough, so I'm going to delete it and do a wider one. So I'm going to make my brush bigger. Make sure I got it big enough to cover this area. Still not big enough. So I'm trying to estimate here. Definitely needs to be bigger. Okay, so bigger. I'll just widen it even more. Make sure we got lots big. Okay, and then over this spot, see what it does. Oh, this looks like an abstract something in the background. That looks good. And I'm going to do one more for that other white spot. And drag it over. This is a great little trick because when you have multiple cloning spots, there we go. It looks like a blob, but that's okay. It's better than that big white spot, right? Now that I'm back here again, I can make some further tweaks. I can adjust it all brighter and make sure that there's some good blacks. Okay. There we go. So there's a before. Okay. So the biggest thing is, remember when we look at images upside down, let's do this one upside down. Okay. So when we look at the original upside down, where does your eye go? If you could please share I did a video on that, right, Rob? If you could please share the video on looking at your images upside down, the upside down trick, that's what it's called. It'll give your eye a trick because you know what you were taking a picture of, but everybody else doesn't, right? So when you look at the image upside down, okay, your eye will naturally go to the brightest areas, the most colorful, all of those things that we talk about, right? The 4 things. Let me find my little banner on that. Okay, so the 4 things that grab your attention, those things on the screen now: brightness, sharpness, color, especially bright color, and contrast. Okay, so you can see that that's occurring in the background right now, right? So then in the after image, everything that I've done brings your eye now to Santa. Okay, so I haven't darkened the window completely, just enough so that it's not the brightest thing in the picture. Okay, and if we want our eye to go more to Santa than the snowman, we could do another addition here as well. So let's put them right side up again. And I'm just going to do a graduated filter here. Okay, so linear gradient. They used to call it a graduated filter. You can move this box around, by the way, if it's in your road. Okay, so I'm just going to do a linear gradient over the snowman like this, and then just darken the exposure a little bit. Okay. So he's minimized and our eye goes to Santa. See the difference? So all of these things are really subtle, but it's all about deciding what's your subject, which is why I asked you about the Nutcracker versus the violin, okay? And bringing attention to the subject, okay? Jamie says, just a caution, if you are entering some photo competitions, textures or sky must be your own creation. Those included in programs are not allowed. That's a good point. So if you are entering photo competitions, make sure that you read the rules, right? In this particular case, Jamie, that was a texture that I created. So if it was my image, I put the texture on. But for your own purposes, have at her. Better late than never, Rob says to Marty. Brighter part and the yellow nose. So when he was upside down, that's where it goes to. Okay. Your eye goes to the to the bright window. And now he goes to the subject. No, you're right. You're right, Sheila. It goes to the window when it's upside down for sure. For sure. Okay. All right. So let's go back and see if we have some others to work on. I got a couple more minutes here. Now we've got an outdoor one. We might have time for one or two more images, so I'll let you guys pick. We've got an outdoor one, which is a typical Canadian snowy scene. This one I could also put into winter scenes as well, but I thought it was a holiday thing. We've got some Christmas lights, and it looks like flamingos. Okay, so we've got some flamingos on that one. That's interesting. Or we've got a person with some poinsettias. My brain was not thinking of the word. You could see the person taking a picture with a cell phone here, and some little outdoor figurines. Okay. Which one do you guys want to work on? Do you want to see? I'll just pick one figurine. Which one do you guys want to work on? 1, 2, 3, or 4? Lisa is the winter scene. So the first one with the little, it looks like a hay wagon. So it's probably being used for hay rides or something in the winter, right? I like the wagon too. I'm interested with the Christmas lights with the flamingos. Tell me about that one, Sheila. We don't have a lot of flamingos. Dan has flamingos in his area, I'm sure. Sheila says number 1 is a sheep farm. We got number one or two, number 2. Okay, so it looks like number 1 and number 2. Okay, number 1 is the faraway winner. All right, so let's go back to this. Do you guys like this democratic process here? Okay. Stan says night. Well, you know what, Stan? If I don't do this one today, you know what? I'll put it into the night batch. So I'll save that one. Okay. And I could even put the one with the poinsettias into people. So we'll recategorize some of these. So I'll do this one and the figurine, and we'll recategorize the other one. How about that? Okay, so our little wagon, right? did anybody ever have when you're crying as a child and somebody says, "Well, I'll fix your little red wagon." It's like, oh, it was a cancer fundraiser. Interesting. I'll fix your little red wagon. It's like, I'll give you something to cry about, right? Okay, camera matching. So Nikon again. Okay, look at this one. Landscape. Add some nice punch there. Portrait. These ones are a little too flat this time. So I think we're going to go with either standard or landscape. So if you want to compare two different ones and see how the mouse is kind of tricky to get from one to the other, just select one. So standard. You can also favorite these too, right? So if you favorite them, they're going to show up here, okay? Because I've favorited some of these are all Adobe. They've always added their own as favorites, but I could get rid of the Adobe ones. But I added the artistic as my favorite, number 7, because I like that one. So you can add them into your favorites. So to compare the camera standard, which is currently selected, and landscape, I just have to highlight or select standard. And then when I go over here, you know what? I'm going to go with standard because I'm going to add that texture or that blackness in myself. So again, I don't want to get too much contrast. Okay. Now there's some really nice warmth happening in the background here. So it looks like it's taken near sunset. The white of the snow looks pretty neutral, but we can try and see what happens if we do auto. Okay. It definitely went more blue, okay, but we've lost that sort of warm color in the sky. So I'm going to undo that. And let's try the eyedropper on the snow. Okay, it got warmer, okay? See that? So auto wanted to remove the tint and it made it less warm. And the eyedropper placed selectively here on the snow actually made it warmer. Okay, so it made the snow neutral. So I kind of like that actually because we're really bringing out this sunset here. So I'm going to go somewhere in between. And I'm just making note of the numbers. Okay, so if I go to as shot, it was at 10,000. And the custom one that I just did is at 14,000. So I'm just going to go somewhere in between. Let's try 12 and then a little bit less magenta. Actually, that looks pretty good. So 12,000. There we go. Okay, so just a few color corrections, but look at the difference that it makes in the red bow, okay, by changing the white balance. Okay. Now let's do our shift double click on the whites and the blacks. And, see how just adjusting the blacks got this darkness and richness of color here, which is the same as I would have got from the landscape profile. But doing it this way, I've got more control. So if I want more, I can go more. But if I want less, I don't have to start correcting for the profile. So choose a profile that's closest to what you want, but doesn't go over the top. Okay. I want to make sure that the snow is not clipping. So I'm using the Alt Option key. I'm going to bring the highlights down a bit. So see the snow? Okay. I want to have a little bit of texture in the snow. Right? I want to make sure that it's not just fully blasted out white. Right? Let's go minus the highlights a little bit. And I'll just add a little edge vignette. That looks pretty good. So I don't see a lot. Give it a little bit of clarity. If I do, look what happens if we do plus clarity. Okay, so the wagon starts to look nice, but things in the background, anything that's out of focus, when you do really high clarity, right, you end up getting this sort of crunchy look. So instead of doing overall clarity, I want to do select subject and see if it picks the wagon. Right, it looks like it got most of the wagon, but not all of it. Right, so we could try to add to it by choosing object. Now, this one might be tricky because if we don't want the snow selected, we have to sort of do, I got to paint each row here, right? And try to not get the background. So I'm painting, and you have to do this in one brush stroke. You can't let go. So that's the tricky part. That's better. There we go. Okay, so now we've got most of the wagon selected. And if I wanted a little bit of the snow down here, which I think actually would be nice, I'll just do add again and just brush it in. But this time without auto mask. And I'm just going to add, I want a little bit more texture in the snow here. So I'll get this whole area like so. Okay, now that we've got our selection, so that was all just selecting, then we can add clarity, texture, right? And if I want to brighten it up a little bit more, anything else I can do while I'm in here. Okay, so if I want to increase the exposure a little bit, there we go. Maybe not exposure, actually, maybe shadows in this case. That looks good. There we go. Okay, so see what this is doing. See how the clarity actually brought more of the detail out in the snow as well. So wagon toe. Let's have a look at the before and after. So literally we've just sort of punched it up a little bit, and there's not a lot to do. The only thing I want to check here is the wagon is sort of like leaning this way, but I think it's crooked. It's not straight. But I want to make sure that the barn in the background is. So I'm going to do crop, and I'm going to try auto, and I think it's going to try and correct for the wagon, but it actually, I'm not sure what it's choosing here. I'm going to just do a line with the ruler, and I'm going to follow this line on the barn here. So I'm going to put it up as high as possible on this line, and I'm going to drag all the way down here and lining it up with that ridge. You see that? So I'm lining it up as best I can. So now it's straightened that way, right? So I'm not sure if that is straight either, but it looks like it looks like the barn is now straight and the wagon is really crooked, right? But generally you want buildings to be straight. So I'm going to go somewhere in between. If the building looks a little bit crooked, I'm okay with that. But I don't want to lose the bottom of the wagon here. That's more of a priority. There we go. Something like that. If we want to darken the sky, we can. Let's see if it selects the sky very well here. Okay, I can't see it because it's red. So can you see why I'm changing the overlay color? Because the sky is orange and the overlay is red. So if I change it to green, I can see better. I don't know that it's gotten all of that, right? If you were not sure if it's selecting everything, right, do an extreme adjustment. You see it's not selecting the whole sky. So I'm going to undo that, and I'm going to try color range instead, because the color of the sky is quite unique. So I'm going to try color range and then just select in here. Okay, so it's selected everything, and then I'm just going to refine it a little bit. See this slider here? Now look at that. There we got the sky. So there's more than one way to get the selection that you want if it doesn't pick the right thing immediately. So I'm going to lower the highlights and darken the exposure. Okay, so now the sky has got this really nice warm glow, and it brings out the color even more. Okay. So if select subject doesn't work, you could try select object. If select sky doesn't work, you could try color. Okay, so there's multiple different ways to get the result that you're looking for. And that's pretty much all I would do with this one, right? Not a lot more needs to be added. So sometimes simplicity, well, almost always simplicity is a good thing. I think simplicity is a good thing. All right, let's do one of these characters here. So I'm going to do the first one, and then let's see if we can copy and paste to the other one, okay? So let's run through these ones quickly. We're going to do color profile. Let's try landscape. Look at that. Boom, nice contrast, right? I'm not even going to go much farther than that. Landscape, boom. Let's try white balance auto. Okay? Definitely not too cold, right? I'm going to try the eyedropper on the edge of the door frame here because it looks like it should be white. Right? So again, that is neutral, right? But is that what we want? I'd like to make it a bit warmer. So I'm just increasing the yellow, and we could decrease the green or the pink, which gives it green a little bit. Okay, watch the edges of your images because this area, remember when we look at it upside down, right? Where does your eye go? Here, where does your eye go? For me, it definitely goes to this edge here, this window, right? And then over to this white door frame, and then finally to her, okay? So make sure that we can darken that with the vignette, or we can simply crop it. So I'm going to do auto crop to see if there's any crookedness. So it looks like it's straightening. I'm not sure that's straight either. I could try the ruler on the edge of the frame here as well. See, it is straight. Yeah, so it looks not too bad. I'm going to crop in a little bit. I'm holding the shift key again, and I just want to get rid of that white over on the left. Okay? So just coming in a little bit, and it's kind of cropping off the bottom of this thing here, this planter. I'd like to see the whole planter or come in more, and that applies to people's feet too. Oh, it's Holly's birthday. Happy birthday. Should we sing? No, I don't think you want us to sing. So I'm going to come in a little bit more on the planter, on the right side and on the bottom. Right? So when I do enter, we still got a little bit of white over here, but that's okay. We're going to add a vignette, but it's taking care of all of that stuff over here. Okay, so now I'm just going to do one of my presets. I might even do strong vignette. Okay, so strong vignette literally is just this. Okay, it's just a preset applying this. Okay, now when we come back here, I can do my shift double click. Okay. It's definitely clipping on the white sort of collar there, but I'll bring the highlights down to fix that. It's got some really nice lighting. This is a nice portrait of this, what would you call it? A figurine? A mannequin? She's got nicer gloves than I do. It looks like she's got nice leather gloves on, or is that a blow-up doll? Hard to tell. Okay, so that's before and after. Okay, now I'm going to go to the next image, which is similar. Okay, looks like it's shot on the same deck, but a different angle. Okay, so I'm going to do previous. Now, keep in mind that when I do previous, it's going to apply everything, including the crop. Okay, so the danger with previous is you don't get to choose which aspects of the stuff you're copying over. Okay, this is interesting because this one is wearing a sari. So I'm going to undo it and instead go over here and copy and paste. And I'm going to choose everything except crop. And we didn't do any healing. Okay, so everything except crop. Now when I paste, it will do the same, but without cropping. Okay, so previous is everything, copy and paste, you get to choose. Okay, this one looks a little bit darker, and we're definitely going to correct the tilt on this one as well. So it looks like we've got some tilt here, like so. And I might come in the same issue, get rid of that white over here. Or what we could do is I'm going to leave the crop tool open and go down to the bottom under transform. Okay, because it looks like it's crooked and there's some perspective distortion. Okay, so I'm going to try auto down in here under transform. So it's going to try and correct for tilt and vertical correction. And see, it's not doing it as well as I would have liked. So let's just do this visually for correction of the tilt. And then let's try auto. Aha, so that's actually pretty good. So see how it brought this side over and made this part of the image larger? So it's correcting left to right distortion. If we just want vertical, yeah, I'm still not crazy about it. We can also do it manually. There we go. Something like that. Constrain crop will crop it for us. Okay, I'm looking at the verticals here, okay, trying to make sure that everything is straight. And that is definitely closer. I'm looking at this vertical, and this vertical, and trying to make sure they are straight. Like so. And I'll just crop that white part out again on the left. There we go. I left a little sliver. Now, this is another good time to use select subject because it will probably select the little figurine here. Now, I've made a preset, and if you have my Lightroom course, then go to that new lesson that I added. It's lesson 47 because I've given you some free presets that I created here. One of them is lighten subject, darken background. Okay, so when I click it, it applies two masks for you automatically. Okay, and you could see here that it's selected the subject, okay, and brightened the subject, and selected the background and darkened the background. Okay, so if we see what the masks are doing, now the interesting thing is with the subject, it's not selected the bottom part here. Okay, it's kind of missing the bottom part of her sari or her dress. So we just need to do a quick selection of object. And I'll just paint in this part of her dress. Like so. And there we go. It's picking up the tree a little bit as well, but I'm not too concerned about that. Okay, now it's got her whole dress. So we can see what it's doing. Now keep in mind that it probably made the same mistake on the background. Okay, see that? So it thought that this was part of the background. So I added it to the subject, and now I have to subtract it from the background. Okay, so anytime it misses part of the subject, you have to remember to do it on both the subject and the background layers or mask. It's kind of like a layer. Right? Oops. See, I minus that one. I'm supposed to add it. That was my mistake. What did I do here? Object. Yes, I need to minus object. And let me just get the whole bottom of the dress. There we go. Okay, so I minused it on both subject and object. Before and after. So that's one of the masks that I gave you, one of the presets. All right, let's see how everybody's doing. So on the, I'm guessing this was the barn or the wagon, right? So this was sunset, and you did 3 shots to capture the sunset. You sent me the middle exposure, but that was the correct exposure. And honestly, there wasn't really a reason to do HDR here. Okay, so if you're bracketing to do HDR, right? Let's take a look at the original. Here, let me just make a copy and we'll reset it. Right? When you're looking to do HDR or feeling like you need to bracket, what you're looking for is anything going off the graph. And if I turn on the clipping warnings, there's nothing clipping here. Okay, so the exposure is absolutely perfect. You don't need to bracket here because there's nothing off the chart. There's nothing in the darks or the shadows that's clipping, and there's nothing in the sky that's clipping. Okay, Rob, if you could please share a link to when to do to HDR or not. That's the one I'm looking for. HDR or not. Okay, that will help you to know when you have to bracket. But what you did, Sheila, is absolutely perfect because you weren't sure. Take the shots when you're there, and you can always decide to use them and make HDR or just use one. Okay, so what you did was absolutely correct and perfect. The wagon was almost broken. Yeah, it definitely looks like it's tilting, but it's pretty. And photographers see pretty in things that other people see ugly, right? The characters are part of Father Christmas. Oh, that's really cool. Home of 3 old churches. That's really cool. Yeah, it looks like this one definitely has some character. So there's starfish all over the. I don't know if this is it's supposed to be a guy, I guess, because it looks like he's got moss or something as his beard, and then he's got some starfish here. Let me turn off the clipping warnings. There we go. He's got some starfish here and some more sort of sea moss. But this material, eh, this is from making. This is a sari material. So I have something like this that I bought in India. So it's just an interesting combination of things that have been put together to make this character, for sure. I might increase the exposure a little bit now that I've darkened the background. There we go. So anytime you apply a mask like that, where it's lightening and darkening, go back and check the overall exposure, right? So I'm just checking to make sure I'm not clipping anything, make sure that I've got some nice brightness on the subject, and overall that the exposure is good. Cliff. Excellent. Thank you, Darlene. I've been away too long from photography and post-processing. Well, I'm glad you found this useful. What program are you using, Cliff? And now actually might be a good time for me to share the link, because I haven't talked about this, to submit your images. We actually have a lot of images right now. So what I'm going to suggest that anybody can send me is, we're looking for some street photography. We can get some more night photography. I've got lots for next week for winter, and I've still got some from people when we did people a couple weeks ago. So send me your street photography and your night photography, and we'll have those coming up soon. So if you'd like to participate, Cliff, go ahead and send some images, and maybe you'll see me editing your images next time. Sheila says that was my Elvis phase, better known as puke green. Trish, so true about pretty. I was once on a photo walk and we were mocked for taking pictures of moss. Well, Rob could tell you a story about me and a cat in Spain. So I'll tell the story because Rob's not on the microphone. So we were in Cadaqués, Spain, which is the home of Salvador Dali. You can go visit Salvador Dali's house. And I'm gonna go find that image while we're doing this. Okay, I said I wasn't going to come on big. Okay, anyways, now you can see how puffy I am, and my hair's all crazy today. I've got crazy hair. Yes, cityscapes, urban, and street photography. And Rob says he immediately thought of the Spain story. So I'm gonna go find that image, but I don't want to ruin the story by showing it to you first. So I'm gonna keep talking while I'm looking for the image here. So we were in Spain. We were at this house of Salvador Dali's, which is actually a museum. And when you go there, you have to book a time slot. Okay, so when you do that, you're waiting outside. So we are waiting outside for our time slot to occur, and I was photographing some things. And one of the things that I found interesting happened to be a cat that was sleeping, and I found the image already, right? That was sleeping in an old boat. So there he is. Okay. So the cat was sleeping in this old boat, and I just liked the contrast of, the fuzzy, fluffy cat with the old, rotting sea boat, right? And our friend Michelle and Rob were standing over by the house, and I was photographing this cat. Keep in mind, we're in Spain, okay? So most of the people are speaking Spanish. These two ladies, I'm going to guess they were American, perhaps. I don't know. But they spoke English, and they said, oh, look at that girl. She's taking a picture of a dead cat. It's disgusting. It's disgusting. And Michelle spoke up to them and said, yeah, that's my friend. Or something like that. Do you remember what Michelle said to them? Anyway, she said something and spoke in English, obviously. And she's from New Zealand. And the ladies were completely embarrassed, and the cat is not dead. If you have cats, you know that this is how they sleep. Look at him. He's not dead at all, just sleeping. Perfectly comfortable, right? And I was watching him. I could see him breathing. He definitely was not dead. In hindsight, this is a nicer crop, but yeah, I just thought it was a really cool photo. Oh yeah, that's what they said. Some people will take photos of anything, right? But they were disgusted because they thought the cat was dead, and I was taking a photo of this cat. So, anyways, there's our Darlene takes pictures of weird things. The other thing about being a photographer and taking photos like that is that where am I now? I got to try and get back to edit our editing photos here. What am I working on? Is that people may look at you weird. Right? So when you're with a group of other photographers, they will totally get it, right? Cats. What are our common things? Cats, bicycles, windows. And if you find a window with a bicycle underneath and a cat in the window, you got like photographers like utopia, right? So I think I'm going to stop there. Rob says he replied to the lady that I was nominated as photographer of the year in Canada. Yes, I did win Alberta photographer of the year once. So there's that. Yes, the kitty is very happy. So next week I'm going to be doing the snow and ice photos. I have a ton of those, so thank you for sending those. We've got some really great snow and ice photos, or winter. So that's what we've got for next week. So I've got more than enough of snow and winter, and I'm going to add the ones that we didn't do today. I'm going to put this one. See, I've got them all categorized now into people, and I'm going to put this one into night. So the ones that we didn't get to today will come up in another category. So we'll be doing winter next week and street or urban soon. I don't have very many of those. And I've also got some more for people and night. So definitely send us street and urban photos. And you can send me some more night photos as well. So that's what we've got so far. All right, I'm going to sign off. Kelly's right. See, it was our dream photo. And there's actually a book. If you go, I have the book, and maybe I'll even bring it and show you next week. It's called French Cats, I think, like that. I think it's called French Cats, and it's just all photos of cats in windows in France, and it's it's ideal. Check it out. Google it on Amazon. If I find a link for it, I'll put it in the video description below. So take care, everyone. Have a good week as well, Trish. We'll see you all soon. And I want to say congratulations to Deb, because Deb won the last photography challenge, and there was only like 5 people entered. So if we do a photography challenge next time, you guys got to enter, because she had like a 25% chance of winning, and her name was drawn. She got $100 to spend in our store, which she did. So congratulations, Deb. I also have some prizes to come out to give out very soon, and I'm not going to tell anything about it until I can verify. But it's a Skyline prize for people who own both our Luminar Neo course and our portrait course. So if you own both, your name has been put in the draw, and we'll be drawing that shortly. So take care, everyone. We'll see you next week, where we're going to be doing snow and ice. And hopefully I'm not living in a blizzard myself. Take care.